What's up, everybody? Welcome back into an off-season report presented by Buyers Auto. It is the Lettermen Row off-season report. You all know him on the other side of that screen. That's Andy Backstrom. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Tim May tried to be here, the 40-year vet. He's on his way to Texas. He's actually in Indiana right now. Tried to join the show. Some technical difficulties did not allow it. That's okay. It's February. We can do a two-man show. We can man the show, Andy, without Tim. And we'll have Tim on next week for sure. We don't love to miss Tim, but when we have to, we make do. Andy, we are going to break down three. It's supposed to be three. We'll still talk about Tim's pick a little bit. You and I are each going to give a veteran we believe is going to have to step up and help this team, needs to break out in winter workouts. Maybe a guy that's even broken out already but needs to take another step in my case. It should be fun, but let's just kick it off, Andy. Who is the veteran of your choice who you think needs to break out for Ohio State?
I'm going with Josh Proctor, sixth-year guy, kind of a prove-it year. He's been around for a long time. Last two seasons, he started the season as a starter, but hasn't ended that way. He's spent a lot of the time watching from the sideline. In 2021, he broke his leg against Oregon in the third quarter. Then he worked his way back to the field after that in 2022, was a starter. But then in the opener against Notre Dame, got burned by Lorenzo Styles Jr. in the early part of that game. And then after that, it really felt like Lathan Ransom took over in that spot. And, now he's back for a sixth year, which was a bit of surprise for a lot of people seeing him come back. It gives a veteran presence to that secondary and that safety group that is going to look a lot different this year than it did last year. And he's got a shot to really make a role for himself. It's kind of similar to the last few seasons, though, where it's not a guarantee that he's going to be the starter. The big competitor here is Sonny Styles, in my opinion. We saw him come on towards the end of the season. He played 12 snaps, which tied a season high against Georgia. So clearly the staff likes what Sonny brings. He was the highest rated recruit, according to On3, of all of the prospects in that 2022 class for Ohio State. They like what he brings. So that's going to probably be his biggest competition for that third starting role in Jim Knowles' 4-2-5 system at the safety position. But we know they like to rotate these safeties. So regardless if he's starting or not, Josh Proctor is probably going to play a big role, given that Ohio State lost two starting safeties in Tanner McAllister and Ronnie Hickman, who are both trying to play in the NFL. So along with Cam Martinez, Kai Stokes, maybe a Court Williams if he's healthy, Perry Eliano is going to kind of decide who's going to play where and how much time they're going to get on the field. And Josh Proctor certainly is part of that equation.
It's interesting to me, Andy, because Josh Proctor is a guy who I know Tim has been very high on. I have at times been high on. Lettermen Row has been a Josh Proctor, fan for a long time. But in 2020, we thought breakout season could lead to a 3 and done. 2021, we thought, he's returning for his senior year. This is going to be the year. The broken leg sets him back. Didn't expect him to be there for 5 years. 2022, he comes. Okay, this is finally the time. He's athletic. He's long. He's rangy. He's everything the NFL wants in a safety physically. 2022 is going to be that year, the fifth and final year. Josh Proctor finally get off to the NFL. Welcome to year 6. I mean, it's just every year you wait and that breakout, it's going to come. It's coming. It's coming. Well, for some guys, it just doesn't come. For Josh Proctor, the talent is such as where we still believe it can come. And that's why we're talking about him today. That's why we're not, thinking of him as an afterthought, thinking of him as just maybe like a backup, a special teams guy like he became basically late in the year in 22. I agree. I think if the Buckeyes are going to be successful in defense, I think Josh Proctor is going to have to play a role. The physical traits are just too much to keep him off the field. The mental side has slowly developed. I think he showed some leadership qualities and being able to step up while not having a prominent role on the field. This season late, I think he played a lot of special teams down the stretch. He didn't really get on the field, but he's intriguing to me, Andy. Those physical traits, you can't really deny what he could do if he puts it all together.
Yeah, and the safety position is so important in this defense. It's very clear that Jim Knowles wants to use that safety. There's three of them really that you'll see, and there's the bandit, there's the adjuster, and then there's also the nickel. And it looks like, or it sounds like, that Jahad Carter from Syracuse fits into that nickel role. Maybe they go with Cam Martinez in relief there and kind of split some snaps there. I think that Jahad Carter probably takes the majority of them. So then it goes to the other two spots. One of them probably is going to be Lathan Ransom, given the breakout year that he had this past season. And yeah, that opens up an opportunity for the other one of maybe it is Josh Proctor, but maybe we see more Like maybe it isn't just three guys. Maybe it's two guys commanding most of the snaps, and then the third position is kind of a rotated role. But even so, we've seen just how important those rotations are for Ohio State. We see it at the defensive line position, and we'll probably see it in the back end at the corner spots and at safety. And for a defense that really needs to be a tip-top shape to have a chance to win a national championship, fatigue can't come into play. Like you got to be fresh, and we need to see that towards the end of the season. And that safety group was really burned against Michigan and against Georgia. And having fresh legs and someone like Josh Proctor could come in handy. Then again, he has to stay healthy, and he needs to compete with these guys who are younger. I mean, we're talking about Sonny Styles, Kai Stokes. These are guys that are on the up and coming, and they're really well liked within this staff. So it's not going to be easy to get on the field, but if he can, some of that potential we saw early in his career could be on display.
Even Jahad Carter, who has now 3 years of experience starting at an ACC school, is younger, 2 years younger than Josh Proctor. So even a guy like him is a younger guy who's rising. Even a guy like Malik Hartford, a freshman, who Ohio State thinks plays bigger than he is and is already on campus. Those are guys that are going to push Josh Proctor. He's not coming back for a sixth year knowing that he's going to have a role. He's going to have to earn it. So I think that's a great pick, Andy. I think that if he takes another step, Ohio State will be nothing but better for it. I am going to go to Tim's pick, and we can talk a little bit about the offensive line. Tim is picking Zen Michalski from Indiana, a rising tackle who could find a role in this offensive line rotation. It's interesting because of all of the guys that were mentioned for when we talked to Justin Fry 2 weeks ago, I believe, Zen was more of a, hey, maybe he could play, but then you've also got these young guys, George Fitzpatrick and Tegra Tashbola. Will they be movers? Is it going to be Josh Fryer, who's probably going to be the left tackle if we had to guess right now? But then there's Zen Michalski, who is a right tackle who could potentially push for a role. He could also play guard. We've seen him do that before. And so I think that this is a swing guy who, if everything shakes out perfectly for him in the coming months, could challenge for a role at the tackle spot. Or if he doesn't step up, that's why we say that he needs to. Josh Fryer could man one side, and then Ohio State could go to the transfer portal in May. So this is a huge spring for Zen Michalski.
Huge spring for tackles in general at Ohio State. An opportunity to step up, given that they had the top two tackles, arguably the best tackle tandem, probably is a better way to say it, in the country last season with Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones. And now you got really an opening here. And it seems like the staff is welcoming this competition. They're not just pushing out Donovan Jackson to the tackle spot and saying, we're going to reserve one of those spots for a returning starter. They're having them stay at their positions. That's Donovan Jackson at guard, and then also Matthew Jones at guard. And I think that really says a lot about how they feel about some of these younger guys. You're right. Zen wasn't mentioned as much in that media day. We certainly heard even a little bit about Luke Montgomery. I mean, I don't really expect him to be starting from day one. That's a lot to ask from a true freshman. But there is a wealth of guys. Now, the talent is a little bit unproven at this point because we just haven't seen them. So I do think the competition in this spring is going to be telling, because you asked the question, Spencer, to Ryan Day, how do you know you need to go out and get a guy in the portal? And it's kind of this wait and see approach where they're going to use the spring as this competition. And then if they feel like they need to go and get more, like another guy like a Victor Cutler that they brought in who they think can help them right away, then they will. But Zen's certainly in the running for one of those tackle roles. It's going to be an uphill battle. It's a real steep competition. And I think Josh Fryer's headlining that competition.
I think Zen Michalski is probably the guy who is the most transfer portal dependent as far as for Ohio State. Like if Zen Michalski, maybe that's the complete wrong way to say it, but if Zen Michalski's good, then Ohio State doesn't need to go into the portal. If you still have a couple question marks about Zen Michalski's ability to block probably Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, who he'll go against in practice and good on good, then you have to start to think, hey, maybe we need to go into the portal and get a guy who will be able to go against some of the best defensive edge rushers in the country. And so, I think that Zen Michalski's job this spring is to prove that he can be the guy, because if he's not proving that every single day, then Ohio State probably needs to go into the portal. I think this is a great pick by Tim to say that this is a veteran who needs to step up. I know he'd love to be talking about it, but then we're going to go to my guy who has already stepped up. I don't want to say that he hasn't broken out already. This is a guy who I believe had four straight games with a touchdown. It might have been three. At one point, he had played in as many games as he had touchdowns. I think he even had one more touchdown than he had played in games at one point this past year for Ohio State, and that's Julian Fleming. And the reason that I say Julian Fleming is this is year 4 of a guy who, his classmate Jackson Smith-Njigba going to be a first-round pick. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who Julian Fleming was supposed to be the next in line with, they're now in the NFL in the top 5 of Rookie of the Year voting. And then there's Julian Fleming, who battled through those injuries in the first couple of years, tried to get on the field early this year, missed those first couple games, finally gets on the field, touchdown machine. So you've seen the skill set, you've seen the ability. Now you've got Big Ten defenses in Notre Dame and those other out of conference opponents preparing for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. Well, there's going to be a third starter at wide receiver, and you can't cover all three of them well. If Julian Fleming takes the next step in his development and becomes, he doesn't even have to become the number 1 overall receiver like everyone thought he was going to be out of high school. But if he takes another step in his development, I don't see how this offense slows down even after losing C.J. Stroud, because then you've got to try to defend all three of those guys along with those running backs. I think Julian Fleming is one of the biggest pieces to this offensive puzzle. Like I said, I'll keep saying it. If he's good this next year and he takes that next step in the spring, they are going to be damn hard to defend this fall.
Yeah, and we saw what it looked like with 3 wide receivers that were incredibly hard to defend when they had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and then obviously Jackson Smith-Njigba. And, in that slot role, you can do a lot of damage. Julian Fleming's not the biggest guy, but he's a great route runner, and he's someone that has electric speed. And we saw it in the not national championship, but the game before that, where they almost made the national championship against Georgia. He played very well in that game, and I think towards the end of the season, even against Michigan, he had a good game as well. It was just that break of time after the bye. It felt like there was a lapse where the production just wasn't where it was at the beginning of the season. And, I asked him leading up to the Peach Bowl, I said, is it difficult with the expectations that you had, the injuries that you had, and to see younger guys step up kind of ahead of you in production ways, just strictly numbers? And he said, no, honestly, I know my place. I know my role here. And I think the maturity level of him is pretty impressive. He also talked to reporters after the Peach Bowl. He was very measured. He was complimentary of C.J. Stroud, everything that his team had accomplished. It was an emotional time, but I think he's really grown up at Ohio State, and I think that, he's more than ready for an opportunity to maximize that potential that he came here with.
Yeah, Andy, from the Toledo game on September 17th to the Iowa game on October 22nd, Julian Fleming caught 6 touchdown passes in 5 games. 6 touchdown passes in 5 games. That's crazy. And from then on, he didn't catch another one. Now, he did have really good games against Michigan. He had 5 catches for 47 yards. Georgia, 5 catches, 71 yards. He also will go down in Ohio State history as the guy who caught the longest C.J. Stroud touchdown pass of C.J. Stroud's career, 79 yards against that Iowa defense that is a really good defense. And so he's shown that he can do it. He showed during his freshman year when he had to step into the Big Ten title game when Chris Olave was ruled out. Julian Fleming played in the Big Ten championship game, helped Ohio State come back and beat Northwestern. He showed it time and time again this year. He is elusive. He can do things with the ball in his hand. And I just think that, like you said, Ohio State showed in 2021 what can happen if you have 3 elite wide receivers. Brian Hartline made a comment on, I believe it was Twitter, it was the top returning wide receivers in America, and there was Emeka Egbuka on the list, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. was on the list. And I believe Brian Hartline, I don't know verbatim, but he said, "You're missing one of this list." And I was thinking to myself, Andy, I was like, who is that? Who's he talking about? Is it one of the freshmen? Is it Xavier Johnson? No, it's Julian Fleming, the number 1 overall wide receiver in the 2020 recruiting class. A lot of those guys ranked behind him, now off to the NFL draft after 3 years. Now there's Julian Fleming just sitting back, not going to be involved in spring practice, but I think that you still can talk about him taking another leap forward, even after offseason surgery, as far as his development, weight training when he gets back in the weight room, the mental side of things. You talk about how mentally strong he is. This is an off-the-wall pick, I guess, because he's not going to be in spring practice. But I just think that even if you're not a full participant, there are so many things he can do to take a step forward and become that elite weapon to put in a trio with Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. And by September, you're going to have an elite 3-man group of wide receivers to run with at Ohio State. He's the missing piece, though. He's got to be able to take that next step. He showed it at times in 2022 at his first ever 100-yard receiving game against Iowa when he caught that really long touchdown pass. But I want to see him put it all together, for a good chunk of the season and be a dominant receiver that we all thought he could be coming out of high school.
Yeah, and then one thing that 2021 group didn't necessarily have was a receiving threat at tight end. And you factor in Cade Stover coming back to then a group of these 3 wide receivers, not to mention all the young guys they have at that position. But let's stick with those 3 and then Cade. I mean, that really is a situation where you've got the sports car and you just got to hand the keys to someone not to crash it. And, that's the big offseason storyline that we'll talk about much more in later videos. We've already talked about with Devin. Is it going to be Devin Brown or is it going to be Kyle McCord? But I think all the pieces are there. And you're right. It just has to click all at once because we've seen that from Julian. Even Emeka had a couple games this past season where he was banged up a little bit and didn't have his best performances. I'm thinking around like that Northwestern game and around that time. And I think, getting all 3, Marvin, Emeka, and Julian playing at their best down the stretch when it matters most, which we did see them do, and the defense just didn't hold up its end of the bargain, is going to be a key again for next season.
Absolutely. As we've got Zen Michalski, we've got Josh Proctor, we've got Julian Fleming, and we've got plenty more coverage at lettermenrow.com where we cover the Buckeyes all year round. That's Andy Backstrom, Tim May on the road. He'll be back here soon. We can do another video with him. We miss you, Tim. But I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the latest offseason report presented by Buyers Auto. We will be back, like I said, full coverage as the Buckeyes gear up for the final couple weeks of winter conditioning and get ready for spring practice. It's right around the corner. We can't wait. Come hang out with us at lettermenrow.com. $30 until next August. That is a hell of a deal, Andy. We'll be there all year round. Come hang out in the Lettermen Lounge, the message board. We love chatting with all of our subscribers, followers, Ohio State fans. But yeah, it's off-season report presented by Buyers Auto. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys back here next time.